Hello and welcome. This is Tigrai Television English Program Service coming to you live from Magala. It's good to have you with us. I'm Lalam Tachanu with today's news and now the details. President Debretsion Gebremichael sent an open letter to the President of the UN's Human Rights Council, Ambassador Federico Villegas, ahead of the Council's 50th session to be held later this month. The letter discussed two of the sessions where Tigray is expected to be at the top of the agenda. The report on the human rights situation in Eritrea prepared by the special rapporteur and issued last week in an oral presentation by the Commission of Human Rights on Ethiopia. For more, Sarah Kalele has the details.
President Debretsion Gebremichael sent an open letter to the United Nations Human Rights Council President, Ambassador Federico Villegas, on Monday, ahead of the Council's 50th session that is expected to hold two sessions relevant to Tigray, including a report by Eritrea's Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and an oral briefing by the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia on human rights violation in Tigray that is expected to take place later this month. The President said that the Eritrean forces continue to commit unimaginable atrocities violating the core tenets of international humanitarian law and international human rights law, and called the continued representation of the Eritrean state on the UN Human Rights Council a travesty, adding that the first step towards resolving Ethiopia's crisis is for the international community to insist on and work towards the complete, immediate, and verifiable withdrawal of Eritrean forces from Tigray. Regarding human rights violation in Tigray, the President said that despite Abiy's declaration of what is called an indefinite humanitarian truce, humanitarian aid is only trickling into Tigray. Even when the regime has allowed limited aid to enter Tigray, the near-total ban on the entry of fuel means that critical supplies remain stored in warehouses in Mekelle, awaiting distribution to those in desperate need throughout Tigray. The President warned that the Ethiopian regime is pushing Ethiopia to the brink of disintegration and said, Africa's indifference in the face of such alarming disregard for human rights is an abdication of moral responsibility, adding that a collapsed Ethiopia will have far-reaching ramifications for continental and international peace and security. He also said that all parties insisting on the Ethiopian regime be allowed to investigate the atrocity crimes should recall that during a meeting he chaired in the Benshangul regional state, Abiy Ahmed claimed there was no functional justice system in the country. What is more, given that the Ethiopian state is implicated in the systematic violation of human rights, it lacks credibility necessary to serve as an impartial adjudicator of disputes and dispenser of justice. The President implored the Council to seriously reflect on the situation in Tigray, living up to its mandate to prevent human rights violations and denouncing the cruel, inhumane, and degrading conditions in which the people of Tigray have been subjected to for the past 19 months and counting.
Prominent musician, songwriter Dawit Nega was laid to rest earlier today at Qidus Selasi's Cathedral Church in Addis Ababa. The musician passed away on Sunday after a short illness over the weekend. The 34-year-old artist was born in the capital of Tigray, Mekelle. Dawit's parents died when he was just 10 years old, after which he started to sell small items like gum on the streets of Mekelle to make his living. Dawit joined Tigray Circus March Band. He would later break out as a musician in 2016. When he released his first popular single, Wazame, many praised Dawit for his effort to modernize Tigrayan music and growing a strong following amongst an Tigrayan-speaking audience. His final single, Ajohi Tigray, was released in April of last year and discusses the war on Tigray, the suffering of its people, and his hope for his people. Relatives and friends told BBC that he was admitted into intensive care on Sunday afternoon after doctors diagnosed him with pneumonia and high blood pressure, but that doctors were not able to save his life. The artist succeeded his wife and son. On Tuesday, Tigray Teachers Association sent a letter to the International Teachers Association regarding the condition of teachers in Tigray, saying situations remain dire as the Ethiopian government continues to block aid and other vital services. The letter emphasized that the ongoing siege that has denied teachers access to their savings as well as their salaries is leading to a high rate of suicide in the community, with many being unable to access basics such as food and medication. The association said that it had confirmed the killing of 177 teachers during Tigray's occupation by Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, as female teachers especially were gang raped, killed, and physically assaulted. The association said that it found the international community's indifference to the ongoing genocide in Tigray concerning and said it was time for the world to speak up on behalf of the people of Tigray and ensure the genocidal war comes to an end. Largely due to its proximity to western Tigray, where the Ethiopian government has undertaken a systematic campaign of ethnic cleansing, northwestern Tigray has been housing the highest number of refugees in Tigray. Its capital is in fact housing more internally displaced persons than the total population of the city before the start of the conflict in 2020. IDPs, of course, depend on humanitarian assistance to fulfill basic needs, assistance that has only been trickling in since the start of the siege in June of 2020. Our reporters spoke with IDPs in Shira and Dasilase that tell us the desperate conditions in the IDP camps. And local officials say more than 177 people have lost their lives due to hunger and lack of medical attention. For Kubrom's World Abraham report, Miron Emana.
Shirin Dasilasa, the capital of northwestern Tigray, is housing more internally displaced persons today than its total population ahead of the start of the war on Tigray. IDPs depend on humanitarian assistance for all their basic needs, assistance that has only been trickling in since the Ethiopian government declared a siege on Tigray that has been ongoing for almost a year now. Many in this IDP camp in Shira are desperate for food and medication that's never available.
I am
diabetic for more than 20 years now. I also have other chronic illnesses. However, due to the siege, I couldn't get any medication. IDPs in this camp are in a terrible situation because they lack food and medication, and many are dying.
We're getting aid to some extent, but that isn't enough. We survived because the residents of Shira were reaching out, but now the people of Shira themselves are facing hunger. They can no longer help us.
The IDPs say much of the assistance they've received over the past year has come from residents of Shira, residents who, after almost a year without vital services like banking, telecommunication, and electricity, have found it hard to sustain even themselves.
These clothes, this scarf, was given to me from the residents of Shira. They have given us all they could. They have cared for our children as if they were their own. They used to give us food, but now they can't do that. We are awaiting our death.
We received 10 kilograms of wheat once, but we haven't received assistance since. There are countless IDPs here. The food aid, on the other hand, is limited.
The people are generous. They used to give us what they had, especially during holidays. Now even the residents need assistance. People are dying. I lost a friend of mine while he was asleep.
Laliti Shwabe, a local official, tells us that her office has been able to record the death of close to 180 IDPs in northwestern Tigray. She tells us that if aid is not able to reach those in need, and soon, many may lose their lives.
We lost 58 in Hinsats, 102 in Shira, 14 in Shiraro, 3 in Mai Hansa. The report is yet to be complete, so it should be understood that it's far from complete. People are dying every hour. Our people are perishing.
The humanitarian truce declared in late March has not resulted in an improved condition for the humanitarian situation in Tigray, with just 20% of much-needed aid reaching the region and even less being distributed due to lack of fuel.
Fremenitos is a local charity organization based here in Magala that care for the needs of the old and children. The local charity organization is actually the only organization to provide education and treatment for children diagnosed with autism. But volunteers at the organization tell us the center is no longer able to provide food or medical treatment to those it supports. For more, Aragawi Gabrumkel has the details.
Nathaniel Iskander is just 9 years old. Nathaniel has physical disability and was diagnosed with autism at a young age. Nathaniel needs a colostomy bag and sanitation materials for his personal hygiene. But the charity organization where he is housed is currently unable to provide for these needs due to financial and material constraints owing to the ongoing siege.
This guy is Nathaniel Iskander. He has some mental retardation. He's also autism. I think he has not a good communication. Sometimes they have an open bite. like open mouth. He needs diaper, and also he needs a drug, colostomy bag. So there is shortage of colostomy bag. So sometimes it's impossible just to give him a good care, you know. You can see that personal hygiene. We just give them a personal hygiene every time, especially 3 times a day. But there is shortage of materials. So he has also physical disability. He's also paralyzed. He cannot, and not only this, but also he has also a developmental delay. He cannot move by himself. He just uses a wheelchair.
Freminatos is a local charity organization in Mekelle, established in 2018. It is the only organization in Tigray that provides healthcare and education for children with autism. But for more than a year now, the organization has been denied access to banking services. And one voluntary health officer at the organization, Samuel Mahari, tells us this has meant that many have had to go without food or proper medical treatment.
Especially due to the war, there is blockage of transportation, communication, internet, so finance, there is not also drugs, by the transportation, there is not enough food, so they need special care. So the first thing is that you need to develop, to respect their interests, so they maybe become angry or shout at you, so this is one of the problems.
King and Diamond also live in Freminatos. They are twin brothers. They recently turned 11 years old. Samuel tells us the brothers used to receive physical therapy and psychotherapy treatment before the start of the siege that has all but crippled the organization.
These guys are twins. Yeah, they came from Adigrat. So they have an autism, a mental retardation, some a developmental delay. They cannot move by themselves. So they need also drug, they need also food. So they have a common behavior, especially they have a good communication, and they need to fulfill for them their interests. They communicate with the sign because they are abnormality in hearing. They cannot hear you properly, so they just communicate with you with a sign. Somewhat they need to watch a TV, and they need good food, which is what they like. So at the time you fail to prepare the food, they may be you cannot get a good result at that time.
The blanket suspension of public services such as banking, telecommunication and electricity has left many in Tigray desperate, especially children like those in Freminatos who have been denied their right to education and health care, a basic human right.
And finally, the almost year-long siege on Tigray has made many in Tigray desperate, even those with big dreams and determination to make it happen. Our reporter Wintakidane met with Arafa Bayru. Arafa lost his mother when he was just 13 years old and had to take on the responsibility of caring for himself and his 4-year-old brother. He says it had been a struggle, but before the start of the siege, he was making enough money to support his family and has saved substantial amount. But today, he says, things are much bleaker. Let's take a look.
Arafa Bayru is a father of 2 children. He was born in Mekelle. He says he used to go to school when he was a child but stopped once his mother died. He says she died when he was just 13 years old. Having just turned a teenager, Arafa was forced to take the responsibility of caring for his little brother, who was just 4 years old at the time.
I was raised by my mom. Her name was Abrahat. I was a child. I used to sell maize to help my mother, but she suddenly got sick and passed away in 2007. I was turning 13 when she died, and there was no one to take care of me and my little brother. I stopped going to school and tried to continue selling maize, but I couldn't afford to buy it anymore, so I had to stop. I was really worried at the same time, but I was always hopeful.
Arafa says he started to work in a cafe soon after. The cafe started to become successful, and he was able to send his brother to school.
We used to sell traditional food. I started to become popular and I had a lot of usual. I used my income to send my brother to school. But the cafe went out of business when the price for basic items started to skyrocket. So then I started to sell magazines and books. I was more or less successful then as well. Before the start of the war, I had started to work as a shoe shiner. I had a good business. I started to save money and support my family.
He says he was more or less happy with his work as a shoe shiner and was able to support his family's needs.
I used to make 400 to 500 birr per day. These days were really good because everything was cheap. I used to clean a pair of shoes with only 10 birr. Everyone was happy. I'm a father of 2, and that's how I provided for my family.
But since the start of the almost year-long siege on Tigray, Arafa says he can barely afford to buy food for his children and finds things are more desperate than ever before.
Everything is overpriced. This soap I used to buy for 80 birr. Now it costs 200 to 220 birr. This is kiwi. I used to buy it for 200 birr. Now we can't find it for 500 birr. I'm asking for 20 birr after cleaning just one pair of shoes. My customers can afford that because they don't have access to their bank accounts anymore. I just accept whatever they give me. I make 25 birr or 40 on my best days. The others, I go home empty-handed.
Arafa says this is the first time in a long time that he's ever felt hopeless. His dreams of owning a supermarket now seems far off, and many just like him are just trying to make it through the day.
I wanted to be a businessman. I wanted to open my own supermarket. I thought this shop would be a stepping stone to something bigger, but now everything is messed up. It's not just me. It is almost all Tigrayan youth.
Hardworking youths like Arafa, who had once hoped of building a better future for themselves, are forced to depend on humanitarian assistance that is not only unavailable, but is deliberately being blocked from reaching those in desperate need.
That's it for this bulletin. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.